everybody and welcome to another video. This is actually the second part to a video that was published on my channel a few weeks ago. So this is me going over the rights of the reader. So this video is inspired by a book that I read in the month of August, which is The Rights of the Reader by Pennac. And in this book he basically gives his sort of like commentary on how he feels that we should be teaching reading to kids, but then at the second half, or like more like the final third of the book, he also goes into what he considers to be the rights of the reader and expands upon those. And so in the first part of this video I went over the first 5 rights that he mentioned and sort of like my thoughts and feelings on them, kind of pulling them into present day, because I think the book is from like the 70s or the 80s, so reading has kind of shifted in recent decades. Like, it hasn't shifted in the sense of like the act, it's the act of reading, the reasons why we read, but the act of reading has changed in the ways of in the ways in which we're able to read, in the ways in which we're able to consume the written words, as well as the whole sort of community aspect to reading has also changed a lot. You know, historically reading has been very much been seen as a solitary act, and even though reading clubs, book clubs and all those things have existed for a long time, the existence of the internet has very much widened the possibility when it comes to creating a bookish community, and social media definitely has changed the landscape a lot as well. And so I will kind of be talking about those aspects within this video as well. Now, the first right that we're going to look in today is called the right to mistake a book for real life. It's an interesting right, of course. The right is interpreted as being your right to just like get fully sucked into a story, to get fully immersed in it, to lose yourself in a book. And so, of course, I absolutely agree with that right, and that is basically like one of the most amazing experiences that I can have with a book, is a book in which I'm just like so sucked in that I am just like flying through the pages, eager to find out what is going to happen, impatient to find out what is going to happen, trying to consume the words faster and faster, because I just am so engrossed and living along these characters to such an extent. And so I definitely do feel like that is what we're talking about here, and that is definitely something that we as a reader are allowed to do. I think, you know, sometimes in books or movies you see these sort of like reactions of people of like, get your nose out of a book and live in the real world, but that kind of negates the fact that books are very much a reflection of the real world. Even when books are talking about fantastical worlds or future imaginations of what the world could be like at one point in time, even if we're set on a place that is completely imagined by the author, the thematics, the character work, all of those things are still very much going to be inspired by real life, by real emotions, feelings, by things that actually happen in the world. And so thinking of a book as just pure fantasy and as a pure waste of time in that sense is just like negating the power of a book to make you reflect on real things, on real life things. And I think what we as a reader are definitely entitled to is this sense of like caring so much for our characters. On one hand, yes, these characters are purely fictional and there are many fates to people in the real world that it would like that we should be caring about, but that doesn't mean that we cannot as similarly care very deeply about these characters that we're reading about in books. And so yeah, I do agree with this fact that we have this and so yes, we absolutely should be able to just like dive into a book, get sucked into it, and care so deeply about a character that we're just like, that we feel our hearts racing when our character is at danger, or when they are going through something super humiliating, or when the stakes are so high. It is like the ultimate reading rush to get to experience the story alongside the character in that extensive way. The next right is the right to read anywhere. That's I don't fully remember what he was saying about that, but I guess we could say that like the places where it's like less socially acceptable to read at this point in time would be like in a classroom, in the middle of like a social event when you're like, I don't know, out with friends and everybody's just like talking together at dinner and you're just like reading a book or stuff like that. I do think that there is some measure of limitations that I would place on these in terms of like your social life, that you just like picking up a book wherever, whenever might not always be the most appropriate. But aside from that, I just cannot really see what type of restrictions we would be placing here. Like, okay, maybe like reading a book in the middle of a sermon or something like that in church would also not be appropriate. I do definitely still think that there are limitations to this particular rule, but aside from that, I think just like look for your cozy spots, you know, like read where you are comfortable, where you're cozy, where there are no distractions, unless you're like one of those people with superhuman powers who can read through the distractions. But this is one of those rides that I think like we don't need to be mentioning it anymore. Like I would think like probably the last two rides are rides that I think are just kind of self-evident at this point in time, and so that don't necessarily need to be mentioned in a list of rights of readers. Like it's just like a little bit of a given. And then you have number 8, the right to dip in. And I think that this one is difficult, especially for booktubers. I do definitely know a few booktubers who do this, who just like start a book and like one chapter in are like, you know what, I'm just not feeling it right now, so I'll just put this book down and I'll pick it up at a later time. And so that's what I feel like this is. This is like the right to just like start a book or sample a book at any point, but just sample it and not really necessarily like go into it all at once with the right to just like dip back out because you're not feeling like it, or to just like pick up a book. What I do very regularly is picking up a book that I've already read and just dipping into one particular scene and things like that. But I feel like with BookTube, because of this sort of like, because of the numbers game of the algorithm, and because of the fact that you want to be able to say like, I read this amount of books in a month, I read this amount of pages, it kind of discourages you from just dipping in. Because if you're just going to be reading like the first chapter of a few books, it's not like you're going to be logging that as pages read and then you've paused it, or like you can nowadays, but I don't think a lot of people will be doing that. So it can somehow feel like a difficult decision as a content creator to decide to like put the book back down, like depending on how much you've invested already at that point in time, of course. But it can feel like a little bit of a disappointment. It's very different. It's very like similar to the discussion I had about DNFing in the first section of this video, where it feels a little bit like wasted time, and like it means you have less numbers to talk about at the end of the month, whereas if you would have invested that time in a book that you would finish, then you know that would have been time that you didn't waste, even though and what this right is indicating is you have the right to spend those 20 pages in this book. You have the right to just like go into a book, feel it out, and only then decide whether you're gonna stick with it or not. And I think that is something that, I don't know, maybe not a lot of people are feeling, but I'm definitely seeing it very little, that there are booktubers who are really saying like, yeah, it's just not for now, I'll pick it back up at a later date. I think that there's much more of a likelihood of DNFing than of just like being like, oh, I'll soft DNF. I think soft DNFing is something that's just like even less done nowadays, even though I definitely think that it is indeed a good thing to do. But I personally do also find myself in that sort of mindset of being like, you know what, if I'm not feeling it now, then I won't feel it ever. Even though that's not necessarily the case, it can definitely be that indeed at a later point in time, that type of storytelling, you know, let's say that I'm struggling a little bit with it because it is like super atmospheric or it's very slow. It's very much possible that at a later stage in time I will be like in the mood for something super slow because I've just gone through too many fast-paced things. And I guess because of me and wanting to reduce the TBR so much, I then just feel like I need to decide on this now, and this cannot be dragging along forever. So this is probably the downside to my small TBR, and my wish to keep it this small is that I don't tend to give a book that second chance. You know, if I've decided that now is the time that I'm going to be picking it up, I'm not going to just be dipping in. I'm going straight in, and I do wish that I could be potentially change that. But on the other hand, I'm also a very decisive person, and so for me it's kind of like, you know, I prefer to make a decision and stick with it. And there's like, that doesn't mean that later on we cannot have second doubts about this and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have gotten rid of it. But the glory is that you can always get it back at a later stage if you do still want to give it another go. And at that point in time, I'll probably just pick it up as an ebook, as an audiobook if it's available through the library, because I won't want to spend the money on it again because I've already given it away again after having tried it the first time. But so yes, I do think that would be, that is also something that is a little bit sort of like highlighted by the numbers game, by book hauls, unhauls, by really treating reading as a numbers game. You know, like if before joining BookTube, I didn't know how many unread books I had on my shelves. I didn't necessarily care. Yes, I did already have that sense of guilt for, oh, I've got so many things that I still need to read, and you know, like I should get to them. But I didn't really know the actual numbers. I wasn't busy with how many books am I reading in a year, will I be able to, am I buying too much compared to how much I'm reading, how much is coming in a year or in a month or whatever. Like numbers were very much like the least of my focus when it came to reading. I was just reading for the enjoyment, reading because I loved reading, and I do think that because of BookTube that has come into my life. But even if I wouldn't have joined BookTube, it might have also come into my life just by being a part of the bookish online community and seeing these types of this type of talks going around, seeing people talk about the number of books on their TBR, seeing people discuss what is too many books and all those things. The ninth right is the right to read out loud. This is mainly talked about in the context of reading to your child, and I definitely think that I don't, like, I mean, I would give you that right, but I think it's just a little bit of a weird one to put in there. And so I definitely feel like his last rights definitely have a few in there that I'm just like, okay, sure, like put it in there, but I don't really see the value. Like absolutely, when you have young kids, I hope that you will be reading aloud to them. And when you're just starting to learn how to read, absolutely read out loud. But it's just a little bit weird to think of me at this point in time, like reading aloud to myself. Like occasionally I do that, but I'd actually find it very annoying because occasionally I do that to try and just like turn on the focus button in my brain, you know, like when I'm kind of struggling a little bit and there is no audiobook for it, I kind of try to like physically read along to it, read out loud while reading the words, as a way to kind of force myself into that immersive reading space. But I don't do it for very long because it actually very much annoys me to be talking out loud, and it's very slow, of course, as well. But yeah, I mean, go ahead. I don't necessarily see the value in this, right? And then the 10th is the right to be quiet. And I don't fully remember anymore in which, like how he explained it, but I will definitely interpret that as our world is a very loud world. We are constantly surrounded by lots of noise, and we are also constantly surrounded by a lot of like heckling activity. A lot of, we are very busy in our lives. Everything is busy, 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 and loud, loud, loud around us. And so reading is an activity that you can do that can kind of quiet down the noise around you, that can kind of bring the speed of the world around you back down. And that is definitely something that I think is wholesome, meditative, and healing when it comes to reading. And that's not to say that you cannot be multitasking while reading. That's the great thing about the invention of the audiobook, is that nowadays you can just put on an audiobook and multitask. Whether that is with a crafting activity that's also quieting down your mind, or whether that is while you are going about on your commute, while you are cooking and all those things. I think there's space for these two types of reading, but definitely the type of reading where you're just sitting alone with a book in the quiet, or just like light music or whatever you have on in the background, is the right that he's talking about here, the right to quiet your mind and to be able to slow down in a world that is increasingly fast. And so these are the rights that he talks about in this second half. As indicated before, I feel like a lot more of these are just sort of like rights that I would like just toss at this point, like the rights to mistake a book for real life. I think it's like, yeah, I don't really think that people, like some people look down to that, but sure. I think the right to read anywhere, I think that is also a given for me. The right to read out loud, I think that is just like very very narrow focus, very so not something that, you know, it's like essential for a reader to have that right. And then but I do definitely enjoy this sort of like the right to be quiet. Now, would I add a right to this? I think I would definitely add the right to read in whatever format available to me. Like, we've seen this discussion a few times over the years, and at this point in time I almost feel like it's just like being reintroduced by trolls or something from time to time, because like, who actually cares about the fact that some people are reading ebooks or some people are reading audiobooks, and that wouldn't be real reading? Like, I feel like this is such a fake discussion at this point in time, but it is definitely a discussion that is of our time. It is a discussion that, with the rise of audiobooks, definitely surfaced, where you have this sort of like elitist view of that, you know, real reading is reading that you do while being in the silence and reading the words on the page, and is a reaction to the rise of audiobooks and the accessibility of reading increasing. It's just sort of like, I guess it's just sort of like a gut reaction to change, where some people just have this sort of like really nostalgic view of what reading is and the enjoyment that they got out of reading in that way, and then they are just like automatically kind of feeling attacked by this new way of reading, that can be consumed more fast because of the fact that you can do it while doing other stuff. And so that kind of breaks with their traditional view of what reading is. However, it also has made reading more accessible. It's made reading more accessible to people who are blind, but also to people who have trouble with reading, where reading takes them a lot of time, and then if they can consume it in the audible format, it makes it go fast. It actually is, they're able to process the language much faster than they're able to process the written word, for example. Like, it's just created so many benefits, and I think in all aspects, having different ways of consuming something, different ways of experiencing something, just opens up more experiences, more possibilities, and access to more people. So I wouldn't really see why you would be against that, except out of some sort of like gut reaction because of like some nostalgic feeling that you have. And then I can kind of understand that first reaction, but I would hope that especially by now, the negators of, you know, audiobooks aren't real books, have kind of settled down and realized the positives about reading. Because yes, consuming an audiobook is a very different experience to reading a physical book. And when I'm like thinking about, I crave like reading a book, I am also thinking about sitting down on a sofa with like a nice warm drink, physical book on my lap, but that doesn't mean that they're like, when I'm only reading physically for a while, I'm also not craving for that audiobook experience, because it is just a very different type of experience that once you've grown accustomed to it, you also have positive feelings about. And it's definitely not like I'm going through an audiobook and it's like, yeah, now I definitely haven't read a book, right? This was definitely something else I'm reading, right? Why would it not be reading? You've consumed the story that was in written form. You've just not consumed it by physically reading with your eyeballs. But yeah, the eyeball reading aspect is just the way to access the words. It's not as if the words are transformed by hearing them instead of seeing them. It does add a certain element to it, of course, because you have the interpretation of the narrator that comes into play, but I feel like that's just like a more interesting new dimension that gets added to audiobooks. I'm listening to an audiobook right now that is narrated by a Scottish narrator in one perspective, for example, and I love the fact that we get, with audiobook narrations now, this possibility to really hear it in the accent that it was supposed to be written in, supposed to be read in, for example. But that can similarly be a downside. When I listened to The Safekeep by Yael van der Woude, and the Dutch pronunciation in that one really wasn't okay, and so that took me out of it every single time that a Dutch name was said, or like that a Dutch phrase was used, for example. So yeah, it has its ups and its downs, but I think the main positive is that all of these methods are ways of consuming words, and they're ways of experiencing the stories that a writer has written down, so all of them are reading. Now, do you guys want to add any other rights to the reader, rights that we as readers need? And then I kind of briefly want to open up the floor to you guys as well for a question that I got from Raf on my previous video, which was, are there duties that we have as a reader? And now, I am never anybody to impose things on people, and so I will also say that I think that there will be many transgressions to whatever I would consider a duty of a reader. But I think if we have to come up with some duties for the reader, I think that there definitely are some. The main one I would think is like open mind, entering into a book with an open mind, entering into a book with good intentions, which doesn't mean that we never enter into a book with bad intentions, but then we should just be aware and be open about the fact that having started the book with those intentions also may have clouded our judgments, may have colored our experience with the book. But so I think that is like, if I'm gonna name like one duty, I think that one is the one, right? Entering into a book with an open mind, ready to be taken by surprise, ready to be engrossed, enthralled, ready to go in the direction that the author is trying to pull you, ready to go with the direction of the author, versus us going into a book with a certain opinion in our mind already. And that's why I said we are transgressing against this all the time. I am transgressing against this all the time. There are a lot of books that surprise me, that I end up enjoying more than others, for the fact that they were able to surprise me because I went in with low expectations, for example. Why do I go into a book with low expectations? Because I may have read something else by that author that didn't really work for me. I do want to give her another chance, but my previous experience is there to kind of cloudy the waters. But likewise, I might go in with too much expectations because I'm starting a second book in a series. I absolutely love the first one, and then the second one can be disappointing. So I feel like our duty as a reader is always going in with an open mind, but we are human, which means that we have these opinions and past experiences that are going to color our expectations, which are potentially going to violate that duty. But I would just say, like, the violation might be there in that way, but just as long as we are open to ourselves, and if we have a platform like this to the people that are following us about the fact that we went in with certain expectations that weren't met, then that is also fulfilling that duty that we had, or like indicating that, you know, we entered into it with that way, and so that's could potentially have changed our experience. But so yeah, definitely let me know about those two things. Like, are there any more rights you think that we as readers have, and are there any duties that we should be taking into account that we have as readers and as booktubers, I guess, as reviewers. But so yeah, with that I'm going to close off this topic because I don't want this video to become too long. And so hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!